Hi, hello, how's it going? What's good? It's your girl, Lady Pelvic of Pelvic Gaming, talking about my first ever Final Fantasy, back in the day, Final Fantasy X. For the record, this review is focusing on the PlayStation 4 HD Remaster. I originally played this back on the PlayStation 2, got to the final boss, couldn't beat it, gave up, didn't care enough for it, and it kind of made me resent the Final Fantasy series up until 4 years ago when I reviewed Final Fantasy IX and fell in love. So for the longest time, I've always hated Final Fantasy X, but when people ask me why, I just couldn't remember, other than child me hated it, so it must have been bad. Well, I recently revisited FF10 with an open heart and open mind, and it's not as bad as I remember, so that's good. Before we begin, special thanks to 12 for gifting me this game, and without further ado, let's talk about it. The opening begins with our entire cast sitting around a campfire in a destroyed world. Tidus, yes, I'm calling him Tidus because I don't like how Tidus sounds, and frankly that's how I've always addressed him. Anyways, Tidus looks out into the city that once was. I've always kind of liked those backwards openings. It shows the end game moments but leaves you wondering how they got there. Suddenly, bam, you're in Zanarkand, the big city. Flashing lights, people moving and shaking. Tidus, the star of the Zanarkand Abes, is getting ready for a round of Blitzball when the city begins to get absolutely totaled. Tidal waves and this giant thing unleashing its spawn upon the city. Your trusted friend Auron catches you leaving and leads you to safety? In short, you're transported 1,000 years into the future and into the new world of Spira, where Yevon's teachings reign supreme. After some diving, you're picked up by Wakka, a Blitzball player at the shore, and slowly explains bits about the new world Tidus finds himself in. It's then you're introduced to a chunk of your leading cast. Yuna, a summoner on a pilgrimage, Kimahri, a Ronso warrior, and Lulu, a black mage. All of them are Yuna's guardians, meant to protect her while she makes her journey. Later you're rejoined by Auron and Riku, who also take up the guardian mantle. And of course, Tidus too. You learn Spira is tormented by a ferocious entity known as Sin, destroying cities, taking lives, bringing chaos wherever it goes. A summoner's duty is to end Sin by collecting Aeons, aka summons. Only then can Yuna bring forth the final Aeon and defeat Sin. On this pilgrimage, you realize not everything is as cut and dry as it seems. Final Fantasy X makes a statement about the risks of blind belief. And while I can't say I love Tidus as a protagonist, came off pretty whiny, though I do attribute that to the voice acting, I do like that you're discovering this world with him. Much like Tidus, the player is also left in the dark, confused and uncertain if they'll ever see the bright lights of Zanarkand again. Furthermore, Tidus frequently monologues about the world through his eyes. The rest of the cast, I'm torn on. We have a few characters that we get to see grow, mainly our second protagonist, Yuna, though she's an archetype I hate, the soft girl, demure, reserved, but you can't help but to admire her resolve. And considering what she went through and how she was raised, it makes sense why she is the way she is. Wakka, my favorite character, and the second character who gets development, speaking frankly, is a racist, and you can imagine what his character development might be about. But understanding his backstory and how he grew up, you could understand why. Then we get to everyone else who's pretty static. Lulu, I'ma say it, overrated. Yes, she's hot, but her character is, I guess, motherly, big sisterly. She's very guiding, cold to Tidus but warms up. The most you get, she was a guardian of another summoner but things didn't work out. Riku, an Albed who is super bubbly and a child mechanic of sorts. Auron, the mysterious swordsman, while he's pretty static, his backstory is interesting. And now we get to the worst of them all, Kimahri. I swear, the only people who like Kimahri are furries. Yep, I'm calling you out. Kimahri sucks. He has a cute backstory, but zero personality. None. Zip. Zilch. Zero. The villains... Seymour Guado. You all are about to roast me, but he is fine as fuck. Love me some half-tree people. Seymour is a maester of Yevon and has an unhealthy obsession with sin, which leads him down an unsavory path. Gonna be honest, he didn't have the most threatening presence, especially when he sounded like Winnie the Pooh.
He wanted you to face sin, as Lady Yuna did.
And frankly, every time he stepped on the scene, I was completely in love. And you know, Seymour doesn't get enough credit, and sadly the game doesn't do a good job really breaking down why he thinks the way he does. And I can't defend him without going hard into spoiler territory. So let's just say, when you're alone in this world and adults use you, you wouldn't be so saintly either. While Seymour isn't a force to be feared, Sin certainly is. Early cutscenes do a phenomenal job showcasing how devastating Sin is, to the actual destruction and aftermath. When you get an idea of its size, eyes, you're kind of like, oh shit, how am I gonna beat this thing? It gives a similar vibe to Majora's Mask. In the sky, Calamity looks down on you. While not on a timer, there's an impending doom that lurks deep in the ocean. I really enjoyed the fear Sin brought. It's a looming reminder of the endless cycle Spira is trapped in, due to their inability to embrace change. Final Fantasy X brought the series back to turn-based, but with a little twist. You can swap out characters. Whoever's turn it is, switch them out for someone else, and this is great because of various enemy types. For example, flying enemies are best dealt with by Wakka, who throws a Blitzball at them. Melee attackers would mostly miss. There are elemental monsters which are best handled by magic users. I admit swapping without penalty is a great idea, however I did get tired of it toward the end. It was tedious getting one enemy loadout and then the next encounter a completely different enemy loadout, making me change my party. Yes, it's engaging, but two things can be true at once. It can be engaging and annoying. After attacking or being attacked, your overdrive gauge will fill, allowing the character to perform a special move. Even Aeons have their own unique overdrives. Enemies are tough and demolish your health. I haven't played many Final Fantasies, but this is one of the harder entries. Couple hard-hitting enemies and status effects, yeesh, you're in trouble. Bosses are far from pushovers, but many have a creative spin. It's never spam the strongest moves, but knowing when to attack, what to attack, and who and when to swap. And some bosses have unique trigger commands that may help turn the tides of battle. Plus, there are quite a few bosses that are weak to status ailments. When you think a spell won't work on them, try it. You might be pleasantly surprised. Now, characters only get experience if they perform an action while in battle. This may sound like an issue, but you're swapping people in and out so frequently, everybody gets a cut, except Kamari, because no one uses him. Speaking on experience, this takes us to a unique leveling system, the Sphere Grid. At the very beginning of the game, you're given the choice of a standard grid or expert. The standard grid has more nodes, lengthier character paths, and characters are pretty directed down their dedicated path. Whereas the expert grid, there are less nodes and characters start closer together, enabling them to be built any which way. I chose the standard grid because that's how I played on PS2, and I wanted to get my vengeance on the final boss without breaking the game. The S levels you gain after battle are used to move around the grid. Then you can activate nodes you're on or next to with the corresponding sphere. You want to increase MP? Mana Sphere, Agility, Speed Sphere, etc. I found the Sphere Grid to be alright. In the beginning, it felt like a laborious way to level up, having pretty much a set path. Instead of stats naturally increasing, I had to go into the Sphere Grid and I had to do it myself. And while paths do branch as you progress, there was a lot of go to this dead end and then retrace your steps. It wasn't until later you got more unique and rare spheres like the Black Magic Sphere, allowing anyone to learn any black magic already learned by another character, or a Friend Sphere, transporting you where an ally is. Spheres are also used in various other ways, like Aeons. Using X amount of spheres could increase their stats, or when customizing weapons, they could add an ability. Spheres and items are both used in teaching your Aeons new abilities and customizing your gear. Thankfully, standard spheres are dropped by enemies all the time, so feel free to use them liberally. Spira is an absolutely gorgeous world filled with secrets and objects to find. Keep your eyes open for Albed books, teaching you one letter of the Albed alphabet to help uncover their language. There are Jecht spheres, showing what Jecht and company was up to those many years ago, and they're really heartwarming. Of course, no JRPG is complete without minigames. Guys, I played Blitzball for 6 hours. Now you're probably thinking, oh, to get Wakka's ultimate weapon, right? No. I replayed the first match of Blitzball. You know, where your team is fucking garbage for 6 hours. But why? It's optional. You could lose and the story would progress all the same. Part of me replaying FF10 was to accomplish certain things I didn't do my first playthrough. And this, unfortunately, was one of them. For Wakka, I just wanted him to win one Blitzball game in his life. And while I indeed did win, I did not feel like a fucking champion. Never again. I feel like if I see a Blitzball, I'll just fucking lose it. Look how I had to win. The game spazzed out and I just held the ball until the timer ran out, and it was 1-0. The opposing team usually gets the ball first, and there's a high chance of them scoring. Most of the time, you're honestly just watching yourself get owned. Point is, Blitzball is the worst fucking thing ever. I don't care that afterward you can recruit people and make a new team, level up, learn skills. And don't tell me there's a cheat on YouTube that makes it an easy win. You're lying. I watched so many YouTube videos. Anyways, I don't care. I won and I'm never going back. Unlike the previous Final Fantasies, FF10 is extremely linear. There's no overworld, and after a section is complete, you're automatically moved to the next area. Make no mistake though, Spira is a beautiful and unique world unlike any other. The developers noticed players were very attached to the word fantasy in Final Fantasy and wanted to highlight that, but in a different way they'd never done. Fantasy is usually associated with medieval times, kingdoms, dragons, knights. Instead, they took inspiration from Southeast Asia, and of course Japan. This can be seen from the tribal outfits, the architecture, and their interiors. At the time, the game redefined fantasy, and showed you could still create a fascinating realm outside the confines of the Middle Ages. For a world caught in the spiral of death, it feels so alive. Characters walking in and out of shops, and when you go inside, the characters are actually in there. When you're traveling the long roads, you speak to everyone and they gift Yuna helpful items to assist with her pilgrimage. Even reoccurring NPCs were well done, imparting the knowledge of Spira or testing the might of your Aeons. Taking the time to peek around corners or explore leads to new areas like monster arenas or caves that are hiding optional Aeons. Speaking of, I am told Final Fantasy X has the most ridiculous requirements for ultimate weapons, like the infamous dodging of thunder. I got none of these, nor did I try to take on the optional Dark Aeons, which kept me from getting my favorite Aeon. Before obtaining the main story Aeon, you must endure a cloister of trials, which I actually enjoyed for the most part. Once you leave that section of the map, you won't be able to return until endgame, when you get an airship. Final Fantasy X has been ported, HD remastered everywhere. PS3, Vita, Steam, PS4, and Switch. Which does it look best on? You would think modern consoles, right? But, debatable. Here's the thing. I think most of the remasters look better, but it's just when it comes to the characters' faces close up, they look weird. I just feel like their expressions never look good. Otherwise, world looks extraordinary. They did Spira justice. I wouldn't mind living there if it weren't for, well, everything else. Final Fantasy X is also known for its grand cutscenes, and frankly, they were as striking as I remember. The PS2 CGI cutscenes still hold up, and it's only enhanced by the PS4. And this is a great segue into looking at this title as a remaster. Honestly, a little disappointing. I was hoping for some slight quality of life updates, like a heal all option, so you don't have to go into the menu after every battle. The menu could have used a little polish. Mainly, if you're at the top of the list and you hit up, it should bring you to the bottom, and vice versa. I know, it's the smallest thing ever, but it's so annoying scrolling through everything. On the flip side, the remaster has optional bosses of the international release of FF10 that wasn't in the PS2 version released in the States. And finally, where it fails most as a remaster, you can't skip cutscenes. Yep, that's right. I'm saying however many times you could watch the before Blitzball scene in 6 hours is how many times I've watched the fucking before Blitzball scene. Also, there's an Eternal Calm mini-movie, about 15 minutes, just detailing 2 years after resolving things, and it's cute, and I assume it leads up to 10-2, which by the way, don't ask me if I'm gonna play it, don't know, didn't like the first 20 minutes that I played. Another thing we have going in this remaster is the arranged soundtrack. Some songs sound good or the same, but others, they completely butchered. I'm mainly talking about my half-tree husband, Seymour. Do yourself a favor, his final form, do not, I repeat, do not have the arranged soundtrack on. Seymour has my favorite quote-unquote final boss battle music out of all the Final Fantasies, and they dropped the fucking ball. Aside from that, pretty samey. Play the original music because overall, Final Fantasy X has some of the best music hands down. I found it to be so relaxing and in some instances, subverting expectations like the Thunder Plains. Doesn't sound very Thunder Plainy. I also liked in later areas, the overworld music actually flowed into battle, creating an entirely different mood. Also, I noticed a strange change was made in the PS4 remake. The area music would restart from the beginning, whereas the PS2 version would pick up where it left off. I would have rathered how the PS2 handled it, as you get into random encounters often, and rarely get to enjoy the music. But this is what messed me up, right? As I said, FF10 has super chill music. I want you all to understand where I'm coming from, so we're gonna play this like pseudo ASMR cringe game, okay? Okay. I want you to share my experience. Close your eyes and let me take you away. You're on a beautiful tropical island. Waters are crystal clear. The sun is beaming and there's a bro homie beckoning you to his home. So you're on your way to Besaid Village. It's so peaceful and you're truly at ease. You dive into sparkling waters, surrounded by vibrant verdure. Then, ugh. This fucking obnoxious stentorian trumpet shatters that imagery and you're attacked by fish. Guys, I'm frightened very easily. It takes little to nothing to make me jump. You'd think I jump the most from games like Hellblade or Doki Doki Literature Club. No. Final Fantasy X is by far the game that has made me jump out of my skin the most. So many times have I been lulled into a false sense of security just to be shaken by this ruckus. I greatly resent the battle theme. I had to turn down the overall music so the battle theme didn't scare me so much. Like, holy shit. A chunk of this game's area music is so pacifying. So anyways, the Isle of Besaid is indeed my favorite track. Well, actually it's Seymour's final fight, but I don't like to spoil boss theme, so here it is again, but this time uninterrupted. Final Fantasy X is a fine game, and it's definitely better than what I recall as a child. But because I've carried such a hatred for this game for so long, it feels weird complimenting it. I feel like anytime someone says Final Fantasy X is a great game, I'm like, what? And then I think about it, I'm like, oh wait, yeah, that checks out. Do you guys have a game like that? Where your initial reaction is disgust and then you dwell on it, you're like, oh yeah, never mind, yeah, that's cool. But yeah, it's probably my third favorite Final Fantasy from the ones I've played. It would be 9, 4, 10, 6, 8. Oh, and since this was my first time ever beating this game, it was the first time I ever saw the ending, and it was really nice. I really liked it. Probably my second favorite Final Fantasy ending. But yeah, do I recommend Final Fantasy X? Sure, go for it. What I don't recommend is playing Blitzball for 6 fucking hours. Thank you so much for watching Top Box for more videos like this, and the bottom box is Normal Boots Gamer Tiers, which focuses on Final Fantasy X. In fact, this was the reason why I played this game so soon. So give it a watch and listen to me defend a game I've hated for so long, and expand on some of my points I've made in this video. Thanks again for watching, and if you like what I do, be sure to check out my Patreon, and I'll see you in the next video. Mwah.